It was a bright morning in July when 8-year-old Oliver Parker boarded the plane with his family. His eyes gleamed with excitement as this was his first time flying. His parents, Adam and Lily, were taking him to see his grandparents in a far-off land. Oliver had always been a curious boy, fascinated by the sky and the stars. His room was full of space posters, and at night, he would often lie by the window, gazing up, imagining what it would be like to soar among the stars. On this particular day, he felt something different. As they settled into their seats, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something big. "Mom, do you ever think about how planes stay in the sky?" Oliver asked. His voice full of wonder. Lily smiled, brushing his hair from his face. "All the time, sweetie. It's science and technology, but sometimes I think there's a little magic involved too." Oliver grinned, feeling reassured by his mother's words, though the odd sensation in his chest didn't go away. He looked out the window as the plane began to ascend, the earth falling away beneath them. Halfway through the flight, the passengers were lulled into a calm rhythm. Some read books, others napped, while children like Oliver busied themselves with games or movies on the in-flight screen. But Oliver's attention kept drifting toward the window, watching the clouds glide past. His fingers traced patterns on the glass absent-mindedly when he noticed something peculiar. The sky outside had darkened unnaturally, and a strange, low hum vibrated in his ears. He rubbed them, thinking it was just air pressure, but the hum persisted, growing louder. And then, it happened. He heard a voice. A soft, distant whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Oliver, listen to the stars." His heart raced, and he blinked rapidly. Had he imagined it? He looked around, but no one else seemed to notice anything strange. His parents were deep in conversation, and the other passengers were lost in their own worlds. But the voice came again, more insistent this time. "Oliver, you have to listen. Danger is near." His chest tightened. He looked up at the overhead compartments, at the flight attendants who walked calmly down the aisle, and then out of the window again. And that's when he saw it, a flicker of light far in the distance, like a star winking out of existence. Suddenly, a jolt rocked the plane. The passengers gasped in unison as the seatbelt signs flickered on. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, calm but urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing some unexpected turbulence. Please remain in your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Oliver's heart pounded, the voice still echoing in his mind. Something was terribly wrong. The flicker in the sky seemed to be growing brighter now, like a pulse in the atmosphere. He leaned over to his father, tugging his sleeve. "Dad, something's coming. I don't know what, but we have to do something." Adam chuckled nervously, ruffling his son's hair. "It's just turbulence, Ollie. The pilots know what they're doing." But Oliver wasn't convinced. The voice wasn't just his imagination, it couldn't be. He had to do something. And then, as if in answer to his unspoken plea, the voice returned, clearer than ever. "Oliver, you can save them. But you must trust the stars. They will guide you." The turbulence worsened. The plane rattled violently, sending trays and loose items crashing to the floor. Passengers clutched their armrests, eyes wide with fear. The captain's voice returned, but this time it was strained, masking the panic creeping into his tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing an unexpected malfunction. We're going to make an emergency descent. Please remain calm and follow the instructions of the flight attendants." Oliver's stomach churned. He could feel it, the plane wasn't just descending, it was falling. The hum in his ears had become a deafening roar now, and the flicker outside was a blinding light, growing closer by the second. He closed his eyes, focusing on the voice. "What do I do?" he whispered under his breath. "Tell me how to help." For a moment, everything was silent. And then, like the universe itself was bending to speak to him, the answer came, simple but powerful: "The stars are your map. You must guide the plane." Oliver's eyes snapped open. Guide the plane? How could an 8-year-old boy possibly do that? But there was no time to doubt. He knew, deep down, that this was real. That somehow, impossibly, he had been chosen for this moment. Without thinking, he unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, gripping the back of the seat in front of him for balance. His mother reached out, panic in her eyes. "Oliver, sit down. What are you doing?" "I have to go to the cockpit," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I can help." Adam looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Ollie, this is dangerous. You need to stay here with us." But Oliver shook his head. "Trust me, Dad. Please." There was something in his voice that made Adam hesitate. Something that didn't sound like the voice of an 8-year-old boy, but of someone far older and wiser. Reluctantly, he let go of Oliver's arm, watching in stunned silence as his son made his way down the aisle toward the cockpit. The flight attendants tried to stop him, but Oliver moved with purpose, driven by an unseen force. When he reached the cockpit door, he banged on it with all his might. "Let me in. I can help," he shouted. Inside, the captain and co-pilot were frantically trying to stabilize the plane. The alarms were blaring, and their faces were slick with sweat. When the co-pilot opened the door to see the young boy standing there, he blinked in disbelief. "Kid, you need to go back to your seat," he barked. "This is no place for, I can save us." Oliver interrupted, his voice firm. "The stars are talking to me. I know what to do." For a moment, the co-pilot just stared, unsure if he was hearing correctly. But there was something about the boy, something in his eyes that made him pause. The captain, equally desperate, glanced over his shoulder. "We're out of options." The captain muttered, "Let him in." Oliver stepped into the cockpit, his heart racing. He had never been inside one before, but it all felt strangely familiar. The instruments, the controls, it was like he had seen it all before, in a dream. The light outside had intensified now, and the plane was dropping faster. The passengers were screaming, clutching each other as they braced for impact. But Oliver didn't hear them. He didn't hear anything except the voice, "Follow the light. Guide the plane." He reached for the controls, his small hands trembling. The captain and co-pilot exchanged nervous glances, but neither stopped him. And then, as if by instinct, Oliver began to steer. He followed the light, not knowing where it was leading him, but trusting that it would keep them safe. The descent slowed. The violent shaking of the plane eased. The passengers, still terrified, felt a strange calm wash over them, as if they were being held by invisible hands. Oliver's eyes were locked on the light outside, guiding him like a beacon. And then, in a miraculous moment, the plane leveled out. The blinding light vanished, replaced by the serene, blue sky. The alarms stopped. The hum disappeared. The plane made an emergency landing in a remote field, far from any major airport. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, expecting the worst. But when they arrived, they found something unbelievable. The plane was intact, with no injuries reported. Every single passenger and crew member was alive and well, though shaken. Oliver's parents rushed to his side, hugging him tightly, tears streaming down their faces. They didn't understand what had happened, no one did. But they knew, deep down, that Oliver had saved them. In the days that followed, the story spread like wildfire. News outlets called it a miracle. Pilots and engineers were baffled, unable to explain how the plane had been saved. But Oliver knew. He had listened to the stars. Years later, Oliver still thinks about that day. He never heard the voice again, but he doesn't need to. He knows that the stars are always watching, always guiding. Now, as a young man, he's studying to become an astronaut, hoping to one day soar among the stars for real. But no matter how high he flies, he'll never forget the day the stars spoke to him, and how an 8-year-old boy saved 300 people from the brink of disaster. Because sometimes, when the world seems darkest, all you need to do is look up and listen.